Welcome everybody to another Community Fit, and in particular a CommunityFIT class all about nervous system regulation, restoration, nervous system stuff. I'm your host, James, and this is June. This is our last month of this particular series of the sessions, and we'll take a hiatus and we'll be back in the fall. Um, so for June, the my decision was that we're gonna just do a recap and sort of a making sense out of everything that we've covered January, February, March, April, and May, which has been a lot of material. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, a quick moment at the beginning of this that you feel free, and you can look at Bob. Bob's hanging out today. Feel free to drop in the chat any questions you might have, especially for those of you who have been joining us all along. We've covered a lot. Again, to recap, we've covered what I call like a nervous system toolkit or 5 buckets of somatic practices. You may have questions on that. You may have questions on focusing on the tapping into noticing what your body is feeling, what your mind is feeling, and making sense out of all that. Because again, that's the Geiger counter. That is the point of the nervous system toolkit, is those physiological shifts. You may have questions on some of the stress related stuff we covered, which was a huge category of stuff. You may have questions on the mental health month stuff that we covered, huge bracket of stuff there. Or you may have questions about the stress reflex in general, nervous system stuff in general, overwhelm, burnout, anxiety in general. So if there are any of those questions, feel free to drop those into the chat, because that's what this month is. It's sort of the recap and the making sense of. And if you see me looking down, that's where my chat is. So if you have any questions, if there's anything we can help clarify, feel free to drop it in there. If not, how this is going to run for the entire month of June is we're just going to sort of do a practice. And there might be some talking involved in the practice. There might be some Q&A involved in the practice. There will definitely be a lot of the somatic or self-regulation practices. There will probably be some meditation, some hypnosis, some stuff like that. How to calm anxious thoughts. Got it. There may be some stuff like that we cover. And then otherwise, we're just going to sort of dive into whatever questions you may have. So I'm going to put a pin in this one. Keep the questions coming. So the first question we have is how to calm anxious thoughts. We're gonna come to that. For now, go ahead and be comfortable. And again, if you have questions that come up, feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A function. Either one will work for us. For now, go ahead and get comfortable. And we're going to start some practices. So again, we spent the first 3 months really covering self-regulation practices, how to calm the nervous system or reset the nervous system. And we went into deep detail on that. And then for the following 2 months, we continued those practices, but we did not go into deep detail on purpose. So that you had 3 months, if you were joining us all along, 3 months of like deep study on 5 buckets, and then time to sort of make sense and play with them. And now we're going to sort of do an in-between. We're going to revisit those practices, and we're going to do a little bit of teaching, but we're not going to go into as deep of detail. If, again, you have questions about a practice, what to do, how to do, why we do, feel free to drop that into the chat or the Q&A. So let's start off with that nervous system toolkit work. Go ahead and get comfortable. And it always starts off with a noticing. It's a noticing of like what is, right? Versus a noticing of priority or a polarity of good versus bad. We're going to kind of move away from that, because having an ache and a pain is not necessarily bad. It's just what is. Having, and we'll get back to it, those running anxious thoughts is not necessarily bad. It's just what is. And to acknowledge that in a healthy working system, that will be present X amount of time, dependent on your genetics, who you are, environmental factors, epigenetics, stress level, all sorts of things. What we are hoping not to have happen is to get stuck, and to get stuck in physical persistent pain, persistent anxious running thoughts, persistent nervous system depression, or a sense of like being down all the time. But knowing that that's normal, but normal is also coming out of it for X amount of time and knowing that it will return again. So we're just noticing right now. And again, we can start off, and we're going to start back where we started to begin with. We're going to notice the physical body. So notice in your physical body anything that strikes your fancy to notice. It may be something that feels good, maybe something that feels bad, maybe something that feels neutral, but we're just noticing. And we're going to even go a little bit deeper. What do you notice down in your feet? What do you notice in your lower legs versus your upper legs? Right side versus left side. What do you notice in your seat or your pelvis? What do you notice in your belly versus your low back? On the right side versus the left side? What do you notice up in the chest? And to get even more specific, how about your ribs? On the front and the back side, right versus left? What do you notice in your heart? Like the actual physical heart area. How about the right lung versus the left lung? Liver, which is over on the right, pancreas kind of in the middle, spleen over on the left. What are you noticing? Right shoulder versus left shoulder, right arm versus left arm, right hand versus left hand. Neck, back of the neck versus front of the throat. Jaw on the right and the left. Right ear. And not just the outside of the ear, but like as your ear becomes the jaw and the sinuses, and transferring over becomes your left ear, sinuses, and jaw. The roof of your mouth, the nose, the eyes, top of the head. And what about not just the top of the head, but like the brain space? How much tension is in the right brow versus the left brow? How about in between those two? Just noticing. And then we're going to go into those 5 buckets, right? First bucket is going to be breath work. And we're just going to start with the simple one again. We're going to go physiological sigh. Physiological sigh is a double inhale followed by a single exhale. Inhale, inhale, exhale. We're going to do it 5 times. I'm going to demo it once first. Together 5 times. Or more. Three. Last 2. One more. Scanning through again, noticing anything that may have changed. Maybe adding in. How's my thought process changed or my emotional body? Moving on to bucket number 2. Bucket number 2 is going to be sensory foraging, or what we in this class call an orientation practice. Again, basic. Just start to look around the space and just begin to intake things in the space. Maybe slowing it down, maybe softening the focus a bit, and objectively naming the things in the space. Here, that might look and sound a lot like there's a plant, and books, and a bookshelf, and a wall, and an art piece, and another art piece. A ceiling, a vent, there's a fan. I'm looking around. Or I could close my eyes and I can listen. What sounds are prevalent in the space? Well, I can hear Bob breathing, sound of the fan, my own voice. And then what's further away? I can hear some traffic. I can hear a TV on in another room. What's close and what's farthest away? Or we could do it sensory. What does it feel like to sit in the chair you're sitting in or lying down in or whatever, wherever you're at, right? Again, I'm cueing from my personal body, and I'm blessed to have 2 arms, 2 legs, a sensory system, eyes that fully function, ears that both have full ability to them. Your body, your experience might be different. So adjust to what makes sense for your experience. For me, as I'm sitting here, I can feel my seat in the chair. I can feel my legs. I can feel my feet together. And I know I'm in this chair versus another chair by the way my body feels in this chair. I'm noticing where the chair hits my back, noticing the texture of the seat, noticing my feet on this particular carpet, I'm noticing the fan from this particular fan. Even as I close my eyes, I can feel that the wall is this close versus further away. So just sensing, physically sensing into the space. And you can choose. You can look and visually intake. You can listen and do an auditory intake. You can do that kinesthetic intake. What do your clothes feel like? What temperature is it? What's touching your feet? And as you notice, what changes in your experience? Now, we've had 2 buckets of practices. We've had a breath work and like an orientation or a sensory practice. I want to address that. How do we work with anxious thoughts? Begin to a little bit. Sometimes we think, oh, we have to avoid those anxious thoughts or that racing mind, and that will only make it worse, right? It's like a bunch of drunk cats running around and you're trying to wrangle the cats. It's just not going to work. Instead, we observe the physical experience, whether it's a breath work or an orientation or a sense, physical sense. And it's like we're going to look at the anxious thoughts for a moment, and then we're going to choose something different for a moment. We're going to look at the breath. And by look, I just mean turn the attention to, be mindful of. So instead of anxious thoughts, I do, and then I turn my attention back to those thoughts. Are they still racing in the same way? I'm not judging it. I'm just going, are they still the same? And if so, cool. Look at the thoughts, and then I'm going to look back at the breath. Look at the thoughts, look back at the breath. Or look at the thoughts, orient. Turn my attention to the thoughts. Instead, turn and listen to what's in the room. Turn my attention to the thoughts. Instead, pay attention to what it feels like to be in the chair. And you don't have to do all of them. Let's pick the one that's working. It's like for a moment, split moment, turn your attention to this thing. Don't try to avoid the anxious thoughts, right? Turn my attention there, turn back to the thoughts. Observe, be with them for a while. turn back, be with the practice. What we're doing there is a pendulation technique. I'm going to try the self-regulation thing, and then I'm going to allow myself to be swept away by the other experience. Then I'm going to try the self-regulation thing, and then I'm going to allow myself to be carried away by the experience. If we just devote all the focus to those anxious running thoughts, it will take us away. And often it becomes qualitative on our part, meaning, oh, those are bad. I shouldn't be doing this. It's too much, which just keeps going. If we try to avoid those anxious thoughts and just turn over here and it's like, I'm going to ignore you, then the little tap from the anxious thoughts becomes like a bigger tap, becomes a pulling and a nudging and like a sucking you back in. That is true for physical pain. That is true for like anxiety. That is true for trauma. That is true for all of the things. And so what we're doing is priming and training our nervous system that it can pay attention to more than one thing, right? And what we're doing is we're turning to it and then turning back and turning to it, turning back. That practice is called pendulation. And then we couple into that another thing that we've covered called titration. So we were doing pendulation. I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this through the lens of titration. And titration simply means how quickly am I going to move between the things? And how much time am I going to spend on the things? When we're learning pendulation and titration, we pick one and one thing. I'm going to do a practice, and I'm going to pay attention to either physical pain, racing thoughts, or trauma, that one particular thing, that one story, that one memory. And then I'm going to turn back to the one thing again, that one breath work, that one thing. And I'm going to spend like one repetition, one round, one little thing in there. And then I'm going to quickly look over at that one memory, that one anxious thought, that one thing, and then go back. And when we're learning it, it happens that fast. Until you feel comfortable, then we slow it down. And I spend maybe 2 beats over here with the breath, and then 2 beats over here with the thought, 2 beats. Eventually, it's like I'm suspending time over here, doing more of this, which allows me to spend more time with these persistent pains, these anxious thoughts, this nervous system dysregulation thing. And you don't have to do any work. Surprisingly, your nervous system is pretty smart. And over time, it will learn, oh, we're safe to be over here with these running anxious thoughts or these persistent pains or whatever, because we're resourced enough over here, right? It's like a scale. And right now, those anxious thoughts, those persistent pains, those traumas, those undiagnosed things that are bothering you, me, other people are just heavier than the resources we have. And we won't, ideally through practice, we get them equalized or heavier in the resource. And so it's not a quick fix. It's going to take time and it takes practice. So we can do it through the lens of orientation, and or we can do it through the lens of breath work, and or we can do it through the lens of like therapeutic touch. And therapeutic touch, the third bucket, is I'm going to bring my hands together. I'm going to get them warmed. And then I just pick somewhere on my body that would feel good. Some of our biggest, most receptive areas would be like jaw area, would be throat area, would be chest area, belly area, or a combination. Now there's all sorts of flavors to add in there. We've covered those before, but it's really just this simple. And it could be your hands. You could take a warm, therapeutically warm, like a heated up massage ball or warm towel or something you throw in the microwave to warm up. The goal being it should be therapeutic grade heat, meaning between body temperature and about 102. So that's very low compared to what most people do, which is like crank it up hot. That therapeutic grade heat activates, and if we're going to get technical, thermoreceptors in the body, which activate proprioceptors in the body, which does some re-regulation work in the body. So we're using heat and touch to inform the nervous system that we're okay here. And so the goal is not to get the magical right puzzle, right? Of, oh, I've got to place it here and here. It's where does it feel good? Do I need to do it in my belly? Do I need to do it here? Which requires you and you and you and you to pay attention to what does good feel like? When do I notice that it feels good? How is that different than maybe I feel right now? We can do a couple of the practices together. We could do breathing and therapeutic touch. I could do therapeutic touch, turn my attention to those racing thoughts, and then come back to what do these hands feel like on me, right? Titration pendulation. Or we can go into a movement. Movement, again, can look a lot of different ways. It can be something as big as exercise, right? It could be something as organic and natural as going for a walk, going for a swim, dancing. And it can be as simple and as like accessible as I'm just going to rock right and left. I could just do my head. Or shake. And I can't tell you which one you need to do because that's for you to find out. But the bucket of movement helps. For me today, this one feels correct. And if you're someone dealing with a nervous system dysregulation, physical pain, anxious running thoughts, low to mid grade trauma thing, you may want to, as we're practicing with this, right? Because it's your practice, practice pendulation and titration, which would be a pausing and a going back in and then a coming back out as described. Lastly, we have the fifth bucket of self regulation stuff, vocalizations. And again, a vocalization is exactly what it sounds like. It's like vocally allowing yourself to make a sound. And it can be as simple as a sigh. We can go up a little bit to like a hum. Mm, could be a laugh, could be a scream, could be as complicated as a word or a sentence. Is there a word that wants to come out? Is there a sentence that feels like it needs to come out of you? Maybe it's that argument that you feel like you lost that you need to get right now. And maybe it's not just, doesn't need to just happen in your head. Maybe you need to say it and get it out. So again, 5 self-regulation buckets. We have the breath work, we have sensory stuff or orientation, we have the therapeutic touch, we have movement, and then we have vocalizations. And they can be strung along if it's just like, oh, I just feel like I'm a little off today. They can be used for that pendulation titration thing. I'm training my nervous system that it doesn't have to be stuck here or here. There's a dynamic fluidity to my nervous system. We can couple them together. I'm going to do this and a breath work thing. And most importantly, they are particular to you. Your practices are not my practices. They're not the same as anyone else's. That's why I can't give you, and no good nervous system practitioner can give you the like surefire thing that will work for you. What a good therapist can do is give you a library of choices and then kind of teach you how to forage for yourself. So taking a look at that. Now, because again, no other questions came in, we've got the anxious thoughts. We're going to keep playing with that. Again, for like the stress and the mental health months, we gave some practices to do. So some common practices to do might be just keeping a journal with you, whether it's on your phone and you can do a voice memo, you can do typing or a pad of paper, whatever it is, keeping that close and just recording into that. Again, sometimes it's like when it gets trapped within the system, it just ricochets and reverberates all over. And it's about getting what's inside of the system, inside of you, outside of you. So that could be a vocalization, that could be writing it down, that could be a voice memo, and it's just, it no longer has to live within, it can live outside. That might be a good one. Also, the pendulation titration thing that we talked about might be a good one. Sometimes, especially if it's the same anxious thoughts or it's become like a habit, then we can turn into meditation slash self hypnosis. And in the weeks that I taught those, I taught them pretty much back to back, right? We're going to do this somatic meditation and we're going to do this self hypnosis thing. And I have this conversation a lot with a very good friend of mine who often themselves has anxious running thoughts. And they're now seeing a practitioner for hypnosis work. And the comment, whether it's that friend or clients I've had or people, they're like, I don't know, I don't think the hypnosis is working because I don't feel suggestible in that way. I don't feel like there's a glitch that makes people think that hypnosis is that California State Fair version or wherever you're at version of hypnosis or the TV version of hypnosis that we see. Like, I'm going to convince you, I'm going to do this magic on you, and you're going to be Elvis now or a chicken or whatever. And what hypnosis is a very stylized neuroscientific version of meditation that works with very specific portions of your brain to help you rewrite or reroute some of the synapses going on. Because the fact of the matter is, if you've had the same racing thought a lot, or you are predisposed to racing thoughts, by choice or by chance, you have trained your brain to keep going with racing thoughts, right? The brain is constantly remodeling itself. And if we are like, yep, we're good with racing thoughts or not good with racing thoughts, but we haven't had tools to get out of those racing thoughts, those synapses, those highways inside of your brain, my brain, a lot of people's brains, wire together, connect together to keep those thoughts going, right? And you're like, well, why can't I stop them? Because that's where the roadways have done, right? Now, to just stop would be like off-roading in what your brain perceives as dangerous or unknown territory. What self-hypnosis would help with is to reroute and open up new possibilities, choices for your brain to, even for a brief moment, come out of that rerouted destination. So we're going to spend the last little bit going into a meditation hypnosis thing because they are the same things. So eyes opened, eyes closed, your choice. But here's where we start. We're going to allow the eyelids to get really heavy, and we're just going to kind of sit back in whatever you're in, chair, bed, your choice. And we're going to let our eyes kind of look up at the eyebrows, but not stare, right? It's just kind of heavy. And we're just going to do this. And it's like I'm resisting letting the eyelids close a bit so they kind of get a little fluttery. Eventually, they're just going to want to feel like it's just too much work to keep them open. And so then we just let the eyelids close. Your eyes can now go wherever they would like, eyelids closed. Just sense into the comfort of the chair or the couch. Maybe here, even a physiological sigh, double inhale, single exhale, or a long exhalation might feel nice. And imagine in front of you a set of 10 steps. And you are up on step number 10, looking downward, downward into a place you feel safe, secure, and welcomed. And you feel yourself stepping on step number 10. You hear yourself stepping onto number 9, feel step 8, listen for 7, sensing into 6 and 5, sinking into 4, sinking into 3, 2, and 1. And in this place, you feel safe and secure, and you allow whatever thoughts to come up that need to come up. And it's like you're watching them. You're inviting them to shift and to change, maybe tell a richer, deeper story. And here you can spend as much or as little time as you'd like. Maybe here, shifting your attention to somewhere you love, someone you love, a thought, a feeling you love. And once that's clear, that thought, feeling, memory leads you to 5 steps up and out. And you feel yourself landing, taking, rising onto step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Wiggle your fingers, open your eyes, and look around. Now, again, just due to class, this is something we've covered before. It was a hyper abbreviated, really quick version of a meditation slash hypnosis. We'll spend more time sometime this month, kind of diving into that a little bit more. But it's about the eyelid thing, going down, being with, witnessing, shifting into something positive, and then coming back up and out of it. And paying attention to it that way, priming your brain in that way, will often help to reroute some of those synapses. So hopefully that answered or helped to solve some of your question in a number of different ways and helped with other people. So thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll stick around. If not, I will see you next week. Bye for now.